Welcome to the Early Morning Life Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Early, and on this podcast, I share life-changing tips, tools, information, motivation, and inspiration to bring light to your life as you tune in week after week to the podcast. I tell you, I am so grateful that so many of you have chosen to tune in and listen to the podcast week after week. My hope is that you're finding some value in what is being shared in this podcast. I hope it's adding some light to your life. But I'm really excited about this episode because I believe what I'm going to talk about is something that all of us face, maybe on a regular basis, but at least some of the time. We're not going to get through this life without experiencing fear. And to set this up, there was an interview that I was listening to with the Mikaela Shiffrin, who is an alpine ski racer. And many of you know her. She participated in the last Olympics. I think she experienced some challenges. And since then, she has had some injuries that she has fought back from. But in this interview, someone asked Mikaela, they said, Kayla, do you have any fears? I mean, coming back from this injury, you're skiing downhill. I mean, there's got to be something that you're fearful of. And Mikaela's response was, and I think it was profound. She said, yes, I have fears all the time. All the time. She said, but my love for the sport and my love for the downhill ski racing outweighs the fears that I have. But yes, I have fears. And I thought that was so profound. I mean, think about that. My love for the sport, my love for what I do, my love for what I've dedicated my life to pursuing outweighs the fear. So I do it because I love it. And I just wanted to share that today because I know that all of us have experienced some fears, and I have some things that I use, some tools that I use. It's kind of a 3-step process to manage and deal with some of the fears that may be getting in the way of things that we want to do that are really important to us. So I want to share those with you today. So one of the things that I think we have to do when we are experiencing fear, or some may call it anxiety, sometimes it's at that level, is that we have to, first of all, number one, acknowledge the fear. That's right. I mean, literally, sometimes we might have to say, yes, fear, I know you're here. I recognize you're here. I acknowledge that you're here. Because the opposite would be to not acknowledge it or to try to run from it or to ignore it, which in most cases is not going to allow us to move forward in whatever that thing is that we have. So we have to acknowledge that fear. Yes, I mean, the thoughts that we have or the fears that we have only have the power that we give them. So by acknowledging them, you actually take away some of the power that thing may have that may be limiting what you want to pursue, whatever that may mean for you. The second thing that I believe we can benefit from doing is that we have to ask ourselves, what is this fear telling me? For those of you who've been around maybe the mental health or maybe even just the psychology world, you know that fear actually serves us. I mean, one of the things that fear does for us is it helps us get organized when there's some type of a threat, right? That's why we feel fear, is because there's some threat to our safety or someone else. And we feel that fear in order to allow us to tune in and to get organized. That's just one of the functions of the fear. So, fear is not a bad thing, but I think we have to ask ourselves, what is this fear telling me? I'm sure Mikaela Shiffrin had to ask herself when she stepped at the top of that downhill situation. She had to ask herself as she looked down and she felt that fear, what is this fear telling me? Maybe it's just telling me to get organized and to execute whatever it is that I'm about to do. If I'm skiing downhill, I would never do that, but Mikaela does. Maybe it's just telling me to focus in on what I've prepared, what I practiced, and to go down this hill focused on the things that are going to help me be successful. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe you have some fear of something else. I remember I had a specific fear at one point when I first started speaking in front of crowds. I had this fear that I was going to go up and I was going to absolutely forget everything that I had practiced and planned and prepared to do. I was going to forget it and everyone was going to laugh at me. And I'll be honest, I mean, there are times when I forgot certain parts of whatever it is that I was going to share, but I've never had an experience where I forgot everything. And I definitely haven't had the experience where I forgot everything while I'm on stage and everyone laughed at me. So many of you, as you're listening, you're thinking that was an irrational fear that we talk about in the world of psychology and in the world of mental health. It was irrational. Someone once said that fear, as an acronym, stands for false evidence appearing real. Let me say that again. False evidence appearing real. A lot of the things, and I want to even say most of those irrational fears or the fears that we have of things that are going to happen never really have an opportunity or a chance to happen. They're really not going to happen. They're not going to happen. Yeah, some of them will, but in most cases, those things are not going to happen. So I think we have to ask ourselves, which is the second part of kind of the model I use, what is this fear telling me? Is it really true? Whatever it is that it's telling me. That's the second part of that second step. What is it telling me? Is it really true? And I once heard someone say, another psychologist, that sometimes it's helpful to, when we're having those fears, is to focus on this concept or this idea of these 6 words. And she called it these 6 words that we can ask ourselves to get through those fearful situations, whatever it may mean. I don't know if Michaela used this or not, but this is what the 6 words are. Very profound, but very simple. What if it all works out? Yes, when we feel that fear and we ask ourselves, is this thing really real? Is it true that this thing's going to happen? It's helpful for us to actually ask ourselves those simple questions. What if it all works out? I've used this technique before, and you'd be amazed at what happens when you ask yourself those simple questions, because for the first thing that happens is that it shifts your focus from whatever you're thinking that's intensifying the fear. And then it kind of prepares your mind to accept the fact that it can actually work out. That this thing that we're fearing could just work out. It may not happen. And whatever we're pursuing, it can work out. Or what if it all worked out? So I challenge you to ask yourself that question when you have, you're in a fearful situation where you're experiencing an intense fear and maybe even at the level of anxiety, to just ask yourself, what if it all works out? And then the third part of this model that I like to share with people that has actually worked for me is that once we have acknowledged the fear, right? That's the first step. Once we have questioned and asked ourselves what the fear is telling us, and we've come to terms with whatever that thing may be, is it true or not? I mean, once we've acknowledged and identified those things, then it's really just about feeling the fear. Notice I didn't say run away from it. And some of you may have heard this before, but feeling the fear, and if it really means something to us, if it's something that we really love, like Michaela said, if we really love this thing that we want to do, then just do it. Feel the fear and do it anyway, someone once said. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear has stopped a lot of people, and I am blessed and happy and sometimes even excited to acknowledge the fact that I've had some fears in my past life of things that I don't fear anymore. I mean, yes, there's some things that I am fearful of, but I don't have the same fears that I have, let's say 5, 10, 20 years ago. And part of the reason that those fears don't still have the same grip on me, don't still have the same control over whether or not I pursue whatever it is that I love or whatever it is that is important to me, is because I have acknowledged those fears. I've practiced acknowledging. I'm not the only one, I'm sure, who's done this. I've practiced calling those fears out and questioning, what is it really telling me? is it true? I mean, is this thing that's telling me that I'm going to go out here and I'm going to forget everything and everyone's going to laugh at me and I'm going to be totally embarrassed? I mean, is it really true? Is this fear or this message that Michaela Schifrin may be receiving that says, as I go down this hill, I don't know if this is true for her, but I am going to fall, I'm going to re-injure myself, and I'm going to embarrass myself, and I'm not going to succeed at this thing that I love. For her, that's the alpine skiing. For you, I don't know what that thing is, but I encourage you, I challenge you, I implore you to think about, how is fear interfering with the things that I really want to do with my life, with the things that are really important to me? How is fear getting in my way? And then I want you to practice or begin practicing acknowledging the fear, questioning the fear. What is it telling me? Is it true? And if it's really important to you, feel it. Feel the fear, but do it anyway. You have the power within you to do that. Fear doesn't have to limit the things that are important to you that you want to do in your life, but it will if we don't take those steps and whatever other steps that you may come up with that help you to get through that fear and pursue whatever fear is blocking you from pursuing. I'm believing that everyone who's listening has the power to do that. And that if you practice these types of tools, that fear won't have the same grip on you. And your life will be so much more fulfilled or fulfilling or exciting or enjoyable without the fear controlling it. This is Tracy Early. Thanks for tuning in to the Early Morning Light podcast. Please recommend, suggest that other people tune in. Like this podcast on the platforms, and I look forward to providing more light to your life through the Early Morning Light podcast. Talk to you soon.